All right, well, we'll call to order the Corte Madera Climate Action Committee meeting of August 20th. Start with the roll call.
Yes. Committee member Trott?
Here.
Thank you. Committee member Simon?
Here.
Thank you. Committee member Sampath is absent. Committee member D. Alexander?
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Lang?
Here.
Thank you. And Chair Burtis?
Present.
Thank you. That's everyone.
We salute the flag. Going way back. Great. Well, before we dive into the agenda items, do we have any public comment?
So this is open time for public comment for items that are not on the agenda this evening. Do we have anyone in person who would like to make a comment? Okay.
Hello. Is that working?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
And I'm just going to start a 3-minute timer for
Thank you.
public comment.
Oh, yeah. I just put my phone away, but that would be great. If you could hold up your 1 and 2, that would be great.
Yeah.
So hi, my name is Melody Schumacher. Excuse me. I have 3 kids that are graduates of Cummins and Hall, and they actually made it through college. So the Corte Madera is very near and dear to me. I'm here to do an ask. And the ask has to do with the bill currently headed toward the California Assembly and State. This bill is called the California Polluters Pay Climate Superfund Act. It's more commonly known as MPP, or Make Polluters Pay. I'm here to ask that the town of Corte Madera adopt this resolution in support before it goes to the state. And I'm asking you as the Climate Action Committee to support your council members as they vote on this bill. This bill is a popular solution to the budget deficit and protects Californian communities and economies. It dedicates funds for climate costs that are draining the general fund. This common sense revenue generator will help solve the climate-driven budget and insurance climate. This isn't a tax, it's a fee assessed to the highest offending polluters, directly contributing to the economic and environmental costs. Analysis by economic experts insists that this will not be passed on to the consumers. If I'm close to my 3 minutes, I'll go over why that is such a key point. The legislation will increase investments in California's economy and address affordability. This legislature is the fossil fuel polluters, not taxpayers, pay for climate damage. There is $1 billion and $1 trillion kind of stepping stone for this. The billions are at the cost of Californians. The 2025 LA wildfires were $250 billion that came from the general fund. The California Natural Resources Agency has done a climate study that asks that the annual cost from now until 2050 place $113 billion for climate disasters. Cal Fire's spending in 2015 was $2 billion. In 2025, it'll go up 110% to $4.2 billion. That's the billions that we're spending on climate issues. The trillions, is what the revenue profits are from the 4 biggest polluters in California. It is at $2 trillion since 1990. The Climate Superfund Act takes the trillions, and allocates it to the billions. Well, the data clearly identifies who's responsible big oil. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but climate attribute science can quantify each major polluter. So far, Cal EPA, California Environmental Protection Agency, has already assigned quantified I did not spark that that mood music. Fees proportional to each company. California would benefit from the trillions in profits from big oil to pay for the millions in the damages we are experiencing based on Cal EPA quantifying those damages to dollars. Again, California will face 113 billion in annual climate costs through 2050. California, as we know, is looking at a deficit. Newsom's May budget had a 1.2 billion deficit. Where does that come from? We are asking that you take this $1 trillion of profit and put it to the millions in damages. This is not a tax, it's a fine.
Can I,
Strong legal support for this. It's based on both a federal law and a California law, the federal hazardous waste cleanup law, and the California Childhood Lead Poisoning Act. The federal hazardous waste fund.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're over time on this. We have a lot to cover today.
Okay.
I'd like to open it up for questions from committee members.
Nope.
That's all right.
Questions on public comment. We can't discuss the items that are brought back
Okay.
during this meeting, but we can add it to a future agenda for discussion.
Could I just ask, could we make the act available
Yeah,
to
that's-
read more details? Is that
Yes,
possible?
yes, I can send out more information about it
Okay.
afterwards that Melody has already shared with me.
Well, thank you very much for your
Welcome.
comments.
Thanks,
We'll be
really
happy to
nice to meet
review that.
Yeah, and I will just put that all your city council members are well aware of this bill and the big act. And all have it in their inboxes, including the mayor, which is a signer of the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Phoebe, if you could circulate that to the committee, that would be helpful.
Yes. And we do have one person with a hand raised on Zoom for open time public comment. So Roy, I've allowed you to speak, and I'm going to start the 3-minute timer when you start speaking.
Yeah, good evening. I have a question about the implementation of the EV acceleration strategy work plan. And it seems like what I've heard in the past, that there's a kind of a drive to get individual ownership. And we all know that that is very expensive. The EVs are very expensive. You know, over 50% of the current EVs are owned by the 1% richest people on Earth. And then the remainder are the 2% richest people on Earth of EVs. So I haven't heard anything or seen anything about pushing for autonomous vehicles with like a Uber and Lyft type component. Now, I don't know if that's the fleet electrification plan, but that's the way to go, because people then don't have to have that major capital investment of $30,000, $50,000, $100,000, and so on and so forth. And I think with the autonomous vehicles, you get picked up from where you're leaving and you get dropped right off at your destination. Beats the heck out of the buses and the smart train. So I'd like the council or the committee, excuse me, to make some comment as to what is involved in the EV program. Another interesting thing that came up at the last council member meeting, there was a school buddy member of Adam, town manager, and he was complaining about and making the point that Black people were being targeted and not having front license plates. So I do a lot of walking around, and I kind of did a rough count. And sure enough, there's probably about 17% of vehicles, that's just a real rough number, that don't have front license plates. And a large number of those vehicles are EVs. So it seems like the EVs are getting away without following the law. So that's just a comment. But I appreciate getting some feedback and comment on just what this acceleration program is all about, and that it really drives toward getting more affordability in this whole plan, because right now it's very, very expensive. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Roy. Phoebe's telling me it's not appropriate to respond to that at this time. Is that correct? So we'll just leave your comments to stand, and the committee can discuss whether that's a topic we want to pick up at a future meeting. But thank you for your comments. Do we have any other public comments?
That is it for public comments at this time.
Okay. All right, with that, discussion of the minutes from the prior meeting, which I was not here for. I did read the minutes, but any comments or amendments to the minutes? Somebody want to move to approve them?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Wait, sorry, who seconded?
Me, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a vote to approve them?
Yes.
Favor? Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
abstain.
Thank you.
Good, minutes are approved. In that case, on to general business, the agenda items. Item A is our annual greenhouse gas inventory review from Christine O'Rourke, who has joined us once again. Thank you, Christine. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
Over to you.
Should I start?
Please.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, yes, thank you, committee members, for having me tonight. I'm Christine O'Rourke, and I am the Sustainability Coordinator for the Marine Climate and Energy Partnership. So tonight I'm going to give you an overview of the 2023 Greenhouse Gas Emissions Inventory Report. This is for community-wide emissions, and 2023, even though it was almost 2 years ago now, that is the latest year that we have all the data that we need in order to compile these reports. So there's always about a year and a half or so lag from the data to when we can share the reports with you. Next slide. Have the next slide, please, Phoebe. Thank you. Okay, so this is a look at emissions by the various sources in the year 2023, and most of the emissions, as you can see, comes from the transportation sector, and most of that is from passenger vehicles. There's a smaller percentage, probably about 20%, that comes from commercial vehicles, and an even smaller percentage, about 1%, that comes from public transit. And your transportation emissions are actually a little bit, that your slice of this pie is a little bit larger than most of the other communities in Marin, and that's probably due to the regional shopping centers that you have in Corte Madera. The next largest slice is in the built environment. So that's the use of natural gas in the built environment. That's almost a quarter of emissions. And then the sector, which is the use of electricity in the built environment, is much smaller. It's only 2% of overall emissions. And that sector has been, that slice of this pie has been getting smaller and smaller over the years due to the cleaner use of renewables that are used to generate electricity. And then the final sectors are also pretty small. Waste emissions come in at 2%, off-road at 1%, and water and wastewater at less than 1%. Next slide. And so this is a look at the trends in emissions going back to 2005. We have data going all the way back to 2005, and then we estimate emissions in 1990 as per California guidance, which is to say that our estimate is about 15% below the 2005 level for the 1990 emissions. And so emissions dropped. There was a big drop around 2011, and that was due to the closing of the WinCup plant, which used to make styrofoam, and as some of you may recall. And so by the end of 2023, emissions were 34% below the 1990 level, and your target in your climate action plan and also the statewide target is for emissions to be 40% below the 1990 level by the year 2030. So there's 6 more percentage points to go, and that would be over the span of 7 years. I'll also say that Corte Madera actually is in the best position of all of the communities in you're closest to meeting your target. And then just kind of as a reminder, the longer term target is, it's a statewide target, but all of our communities in Marin are also trying to meet this target, which is to have zero net emissions by the year 2045. And so of that, 85% is expected to be mitigated. So that would be stopping the emissions at the source, and then another 15% to make up for that whole of 100%. That 15% would come from carbon dioxide removal strategies like sequestration. Next slide. So a couple of sector highlights, and this is just over the 1 year between 2022 and 2023. So emissions themselves were down 45%, and that was because our very clean electricity was even cleaner in 2023. And then emissions, electricity use itself was down 10%. That was kind of impacted by the fact that because of privacy laws, we were not given any commercial electricity to report out, but that impact really is negligible. It doesn't change the overall reduction at all because again, the electricity is very clean. Natural gas use was up 5% between 2022 and 2023. That is very similar to all the other communities in Marin, except for Novato. That was the only community where natural gas use went down. Natural gas use is very dependent on the weather, so it changes as the weather changes, and probably 2023 was just a colder year and we were using our heating systems more, and most of the natural gas, or I should say a lot of the natural gas use is from heating residential buildings. And then transportation emissions were down 2% over that year. The vehicle miles traveled was flat. And then waste disposal actually increased 3%. And that too is true for all of the communities in Marin County. And that's because we actually rely on data that aggregates all of Marin County data that goes to Calvary Cycle. So it's the same amount of an increase or decrease for all of the communities. And the next slide, please. So now looking back to 2005, overall, electricity emissions are down 93%, again, due to that lower carbon intensity of electricity. Natural gas emissions are down almost 50%. Again, that was really primarily due to the closing of the Windcup plant. Transportation emissions are down 26% since 2005. And so that's due to a combination of better fuel efficiency and more zero emission vehicles that are on the road. Vehicle miles traveled is only down 2% since 2005. So the other 24% is really due to the fact that our cars are more fuel efficient and more are running on electricity. And as far as zero emission vehicles go, in the year 2023, by the end of that year, 9.3% of all passenger vehicles in Marin County were zero emission vehicles. And in Corte Madera, it was a little bit higher. It was 11.4% of all the passenger vehicles that are registered in Corte Madera were zero emission vehicles. The town's cap target is for at least 25% of zero emission vehicles in Marin County by 2030. So we are on our way towards meeting that. And then waste emissions are down 44%, and that's primarily due to the lower organic content in our landfill waste. Waste disposal is also down 18%. So the rest of that is really about getting organic waste out of the waste stream. And next slide. So I have a couple of slides here because I know now we're in 2025 and everybody is wondering, are we going to meet our 2030 target? So I've got a few slides that are making some projections that may come true or may not. The one on the left is the growth in zero emission vehicles over the past 14 years. And this includes the 2024 data. So you can see how it's kind of, growing every year. And by the end of 2024 in Marin County, 11% of all of the vehicles registered in Marin County were zero emission vehicles. And as in 2023, as I just said on the last slide, it was 9%. So it is growing every year. And then the chart on the right is showing what happens if we just project out at the existing growth rate, at that growth rate between 2023 and 2021, which was 21%. And so if we just keep growing at 21% year over year, by 2030, we would be at 41% of all passenger vehicles in Marin would be zero emission vehicles. And again, the target for Corte Madera is 25%. So it looks, as long as we could keep this growth rate going, that we will actually be able to meet at least our zero emission vehicle target. And that has it's one of the biggest actions in the climate action plan as far as reducing emissions. Next slide. And then this is another way to kind of look at and project where the emissions are going. So the solid green line are the actual emissions from 2005 to 2023. And then that dotted line, it's kind of like a blue dotted line. That is the trend line that if we look at emissions from 2005 to 2023 and we just project out, that's where emissions would be expected to fall in 2030. And the yellow line is the continued reductions that are needed in order to meet your target. So again, we do have the anomaly of the Wind Cup plant closing, but it does look like as long as we kind of stay on this trajectory and continue to reduce emissions in this manner, that the town will hopefully meet its reduction by the year 2030. One kind of caveat that I'll say about that is that kind of a lot of the easier reductions have already happened, kind of what we call the low-hanging fruit. A lot of this has been due to the cleaning up of the carbon intensity of electricity. So as we keep going every year, we're going to rely more and more on changing behavior, and electrification is really critical, electrifying buildings and continuing to electrify cars. So it does kind of become harder to make these incremental gains over time. And next slide, I think that's my last slide. Yeah, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
We have questions from the committee? Sure, Karen.
Yeah, you said, emissions from waste was up 3%. Is that insignificant? And I keep thinking, well, does that mean people aren't sorting their waste, or what might that be due to?
That would just be due to the amount of waste that went into the landfill. So we were kind of trending down. This is one year where we had an uptick, and it does fluctuate from year to year where, generally we want to be looking at overall trends. Typically, waste has always been very dependent on the state of the economy. So when the economy is doing well, or people are, purchasing more or doing a lot of remodeling, we see the waste disposal go up. I don't know that 2023 was necessarily a better economic year than 2022 was. I don't really remember, but it was due. We're using the same emission factor for those 2 years, so it is due to the amount of waste that went into the landfill.
And Christine, just to add on to that, the Zero Waste Marin recently completed a waste characterization study that we'll be able to use for future years to have more accurate information. Is that right, Christine? Yeah, that's absolutely true. What we have been using is the statewide emission factors. And I looked at the zero waste study that was done, and it looks like the emission factor is about 10% higher than what the statewide average is. So unless it's really offset by a drop in disposal, we may see the waste emissions going up next year, or in the next report, I should say.
Why would you make a linear projection of something that's, I'm sorry, a linear projection of something that's where the low hanging fruit's already occurred, as opposed to, it's decelerating at a decelerating rate is what's happening. And to me, the linear projection doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily, the rate isn't necessarily decelerating. I mean, it is for Corte Madera because of the Wind Cup plant. If you look at the other Marin jurisdictions, it's not necessarily decelerating. It's kind of at the same, so, I think, yes, you want to take it with a grain of salt, but for the lack of anything else to kind of, make a projection on, I think it helps to give a little context in any event.
Thank you.
Other questions? No, I have a few, but anybody else? No? Okay. Well, thank you, Christine. That was really interesting to see. Overall, looks like good progress. First question is just for context. What is the population of Corte Madera relative to 2005? Do you happen to know that?
Relative to what? I'm sorry?
To 2005 or 1990, but just to get a sense of whether there's been
Oh,
population.
okay. Hold on a second. I've got my spreadsheet right in front of me. And okay. So the population of Corte Madera, and this is an estimate from the California Department of Finance, in 2023 was just under 10,000, 9,926. And in 2005, it was just over 9,000, 9,041. So population's is up about 10% since 2005.
Right. So on a per capita basis, we're actually doing better than the aggregate charts would suggest in terms of production. So that's good.
That's correct.
Second question, the 10% drop in electricity usage year over year is huge. What was driving that? Any idea? If I heard that correctly.
Yeah, you did. And it really was because the data that we get from PG&E was excluding commercial electricity in 2023. And up until that year, we've had a number to use. And so in 2023, we don't have anything. And it's due to these privacy laws that are around data that the utilities are by the CPUC have to follow. So if any one entity is using more than 15% of the total commercial electricity, then they just don't report anything for that category. So it was about 8%. There was a 2% drop in residential electricity, and then 2%. It was 8%. Yeah, about 2% of that drop was in residential electricity, and then the rest of it was because of this non-reporting of the commercial electricity. But again, because the electricity was so clean, it doesn't, even with not having the data point to report, it doesn't change the final outcome of the overall reduction.
Okay, understood. But that was a good striking to actually have that drop, but it's not real. 2% in residential, and that's actual data, or is that a modeled the 2% of residential reduction in electricity usage?
Yeah, it's actual data. The data comes from PG&E and from MCE.
Okay. Well, that's good in the context of, again, increasing EV use. You would expect it all else equal to be going up. So there's some efficiencies happening. And then, whenever we talk about this, we always come back to the Wind Cup plant. Do you happen to know, I think you said it was 48% drop in natural gas usage from 05 to 23. Do you know what percentage of that is due to the Wind Cup plant?
I don't, because, they don't, I had asked years ago for that, and I don't know, they don't report out for an individual plant or any individual entity. I can go back and try to make an educated guess, and I can let Phoebe know, and she can share that with you.
Yep. Okay. Well, if you happen to have that information or some guess at it, that would be, just out of curiosity, be interesting. But I think we could probably go look at the year that it shut down and look at the natural gas numbers and ballpark it.
Yeah,
right?
the problem is that there was a drop in 2010 and then another drop in 2011. So they may have, reduced that plant was operating 24 hours a day. I think they had 3 different shifts. And so they may have started cutting back shifts, or that's all I can think of. So when I looked at it, it was really hard to kind of try to tease out what exactly the use was for the wind cup plant.
Got it.
But again, I can try to make an educated guess.
Okay. That would just be helpful to understand how much is, just that one anomaly, basically.
Yeah, and
Oh,
the other
sorry.
thing, I'm sorry. The other thing I can do too is just give you an idea of what other communities are doing as well. So, that might be provides a little bit more context.
Okay, that would be helpful. The final question was actually on the long-term goal of 85% reduction by 2045 and effectively achieving net zero. The other 15%, which you mentioned is supposed to come from carbon removal, sequestration, or other types of mitigation. What exactly do they have in mind for communities of our size? Because in reality, having a direct air capture plant or a carbon sequestration project in Corte Madera is not very likely. So aside from planting trees, what other, when these targets were adopted, what was the thinking for actions by towns specifically to achieve that extra 15%?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's important to remember that this is a statewide goal. So the state they don't impose any kind of targets on individual communities, on cities or towns. So they're looking at the aggregate. They're looking at, certain like agricultural areas or more, undeveloped areas could actually more of the sequestration could happen on those lands and in those areas, and then more of the mitigation might happen in the cities and towns. So, so I think, on a local level, I don't know that it's possible for Corte Madera to actually sequester 15% within the town boundaries.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, thank you. Any other questions? No? Well, it's very helpful and interesting as always. So thank you very much for doing that, taking the time to join us today. And we look forward to
My
this.
pleasure.
And Pat, we do have a public comment
Okay.
for this item.
Yep.
So Roy, I've unmuted you and I'm going to start the 3-minute timer when you.
Good evening again. Christine, do you have information related to temperature changes?
If I may respond, I'm happy to. The temperature changes. So I did used to have data looking at heating degree days and cooling degree days, and then correlating that to the natural gas use. And it was it's amazing how well correlated it is. And so that's really the data that you want. I went back just a couple of weeks ago to look at that data again, and I can't find it. So it was being published by NOAA. It's a federal agency, and I just think they're not reporting a lot of climate data, as you may know.
I have some data from PG&E. So if everybody looks at their PG&E bill, they show each month 3 different temperatures. So one is the high for the month, one's low for the month, and the other is the average. So here's what I've got. I've been tracking since 2014. So in general, the low temperatures for the month. So I've compared month by month by month by year. And in general, the low temperatures have gone up throughout the year. Okay. The high temperatures have gone down for the most part, with the exception of November and December. And the average temperatures have gone down in general, with the exception of January and February, which went up. So I'd be interested in next time you report, if you grab the temperature information, because what's all of this activity about? It's about getting the temperature the lower around the Earth. And so there's, some evidence from this data, that's not real thorough, that kind of says the temperature has been going down over the last 11 to 12 years on average. So thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Roy. Thank you, Christine. Unless there are any other public comments?
And that is it for public comment. But
Okay.
thank you, Christine, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks for having me.
See you next year.
Okay.
Great. Okay, with that, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the discussion of the potential local amendments, AKA the REACH codes, to the 2025 California Building Standards Code. And Phoebe, I think you'll lead us on this one. And thank you for putting together the very extensive brief on this.
Yes. So I will just sort of walk through a lot of the material that was covered in the staff report. I know it is very dense information, so feel free to stop me at any point to ask questions. This is sort of an initial discussion, but we do really want to get as much of your feedback as possible tonight, because when we bring back the draft ordinance at the September meeting, which is the plan, we will be very shortly after that bringing the ordinance to council. So there won't be a lot of time for changes at that point. So please stop me if you have questions. I want to make sure this is understandable.
Questions first and then discussion after. No?
Yes. Okay. So REACH codes are local amendments to the California Building Standards Code, which is also called Title 24. And this code is setting the minimum standards for buildings in California to ensure the health and safety of occupants. Title 24 is updated and published on a 3-year cycle by the California Building Standards Commission. And it includes many different sections. Some of them are shown here. But the two that are sort of most often amended for local REACH codes are the energy code, which includes energy efficiency requirements for buildings, and the green building code, also called CalGreen, which includes all the non-energy green building requirements. So that's where things like EV charging requirements are located in the code. And these amendments are called REACH codes because they're reaching beyond the requirements in the state code. Local amendments have to be more restrictive than the state code. They cannot be less restrictive. So why are we interested in adopting REACH codes? This is one of the sort of key levers that local governments have to address greenhouse gas emissions. And in Corte Madera, as we just heard, the largest sources are transportation and building energy use. And our current REACH codes are addressing both of those emission sources by increasing EV charging infrastructure and requiring energy savings in homes. These changes also have the co-benefits of improving air quality by reducing the other pollutants that come with burning fossil fuels, therefore improving health outcomes. They can also reduce energy bills through the increased efficiency they provide. And a lot of the changes that we're talking about, if they're not sort of promoting a switch to electrification, they're getting homes ready for that switch. So usually there's a trigger at the time of a renovation project is going on. That's when it's most cost effective to install wiring or conduit, instead of having a separate project later that requires you to reopen up all the walls. And that adds a lot more cost than doing it when you already have a project planned. So I've updated the committee on this a couple times, but just a refresher on the changes in state legislation that were passed in AB 130, the budget trailer bill. This incorporates some provisions of what was previously AB 306 that prevents changes to both the state and local building code that affects residential units between October 1st of this year and June 1st of 2031. There's a few exceptions. The two that I want to highlight are the substantially equivalent exemption, which allows REACH codes in effect as of September 30th of this year to be readopted. And this, we believe, applies to our existing REACH codes that are in effect now. There's also a general plan exemption, which allows new REACH codes that are adopted to align with an existing general plan and that is compliant with federal energy law. Yes, Karen.
So, okay, just to clarify, so the the AB 13306 prevents changes to building code adoptions, but if we already have our existing reach code, is that just because we have to approve them every 3 years, or?
Yes.
So therefore, I guess what it really says is you can't, I'm missing a disconnect here. You can't,
Where's the change?
yeah, exactly. Where's the change? Because they're already existing, or is that because they're above county standards, or what?
Yes. So the building code's updated every 3 years, and any local amendment has to be readopted at that time, because otherwise the state code is sort of rewriting all of
It's-
the local
Got
codes.
it. It's relative to the state.
Deviations from the state code.
Yes.
Okay.
Not changes to our code, but
Right.
deviations from the.
Any changes to the state building code need to be readopted at that 3-year cycle
Thank you.
time. Yeah. Yes, good clarification. So that's why we have to adopt the state code at the end of this year. The new code is beginning on January 1st, 2026. And so if we want to keep any of our existing local amendments, we need to readopt those as well. And so this is this substantially equivalent exemption allows us to readopt our existing reach codes. And the general plan exemption may allow the adoption of additional or modified reach codes that wouldn't fall under the substantially equivalent exemption. I do want to caveat that this is still sort of a developing situation. There's sort of new interpretations of the law coming out every week, it seems like. So I don't want to say that that's a guarantee, but that is a pathway that a lot of jurisdictions are seeing as an opportunity.
What, are there any examples of the general plan exemption that are relevant to Corte Madera that you can think of, just for illustration?
There haven't been any jurisdictions that I know of that have adopted through that pathway yet. Is that what you're asking? Or
Yeah, I was just trying to understand what would be an example that might actually fall under that exemption.
so it's anything that aligns with the general plan, and our general plan does include policies around reducing energy use in homes, developing green building requirements, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So those are all policies in our existing general plan that could be used potentially to justify additional reach code. So the good news is that the 2025 State Building Standards Code is already very strong. These are some highlights from the Energy Code and Green Building sections. The 2025 Energy Code is projected by the Energy Commission to save $4.8 billion in energy costs, drive 500,000 heat pump installations in the first 3 years, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 4 million metric tons across the state. And one of the main ways that it's doing this is by setting heat pumps as the baseline for water heating and space heating. So the Energy Code has 2 pathways for compliance. There's a prescriptive pathway where there's sort of a list of measures that every building needs to install. And there's also a performance pathway that's based on a model of the energy use of the building. So in the prescriptive pathway, no gas water heaters or furnaces are allowed for new construction, single-family homes or additions. Those still could be installed under the performance pathway, which is what most new construction uses. However, a building using the performance pathway needs to be at least as efficient as a building that uses the prescriptive pathway. So that makes it very challenging for a building. If they did want to install a gas water heater, they'd have to have really strong efficiency measures in another area of the home to balance out that energy.
I have a question, Phoebe. So is that efficiency based on, a BTU basis or a cost effectiveness basis, or because that could change the deal? Yeah.
It gets very technical, and I won't attempt to explain it, but they use, I think there's 4 different metrics for the energy budget of the home. And I could send you more information on it if you're interested, but it's well above my head. So in the multifamily space, they're not requiring heat pumps there yet, but there are heat pump water heater readiness requirements. So having the space, the wiring, the venting, all that needs to be in place for new multifamily, which does strongly incentivize actually installing a heat pump. And then in the CalGreen, one of the new developments for this code cycle is that bike parking requirements are now mandatory for both residential, multifamily, and non-residential. And that used to be a voluntary measure. There's also some increased EV charging requirements in the mandatory, which we'll go over.
Sorry, another question. So I see here, heat pump, water heater readiness, but not heat pump space heater, just the water heater readiness?
Yeah, there may be more. There's definitely more in the code than is on here. These are just some highlights. So I believe there are heat pump space heater requirements for certain building types, but they break up the multifamily into like low-rise multifamily and high-rise multifamily. So there's some nuance there. And yeah.
And these apply to new build and qualifying renovations? Is that?
So yes, so the no gas water heaters or furnaces, that applies to single family new construction and additions.
But the heat
And
pump
then-
water heater and the bike parking, that's primarily new construction or also renovations?
There are some renovation triggers as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so the other good piece of news is that we have, Corte Madera has existing REACH codes that are addressing our largest sources of emissions as we've discussed. So I won't go through this in detail, but this is just sort of the timeline of the code development that happened really over a 3-year period, culminating in the adoption last July, and just showing the multi-year process that went into that, and a lot of community engagement and engagement with the Climate Action Committee provided a lot of input on those. And so we feel that they're very strong and really targeted towards what our emissions are in Corte Madera. So these are our 2 current REACH codes. We have the energy REACH code for single family building renovations of 750 square feet or more, and then EV charging requirements for certain new and renovation projects. These were adopted at the July 16th, 2024 Town Council meeting, and the EV portion went into effect on August 15th, 2024. The energy code amendments went into effect on October 4th, 2024, because they had to go through the approval process with the Energy Commission for being effective. And staff's current proposal is to readopt these codes where they still exceed the base code under the substantially equivalent exemption. So I'm going to go through each of these, starting with the EV code. Just a refresher on the types of EV spaces that this is CalGreen. This is the green building code where this is housed. And there's 3 types of EV spaces that CalGreen defines. So at the bottom, we have the least amount of infrastructure. That's an EV capable space. That means that the electrical panel has the capacity for a charger. There's conduit or the housing for wiring installed, but no wiring. And that's all that's there. So there's the capacity to install charging in the future, but a vehicle can't charge there right now. Next up is the EV ready spaces. That means in addition to the EV capable, there's actually wiring installed in that conduit, and there's a receptacle or an outlet at the end. So an EV could pull up. They'd have to bring their own plug, but most EVs come with a plug, and they could plug in and actually charge at that space. CalGreen is dealing mostly with what's called low power level 2 chargers, which is about half of the power of what you think of as a typical 40 amp level 2 station. And then the highest level here is just a full level 2 EV charger installed. An EV could pull up and plug in without needing to bring anything with them or any additional infrastructure. So this is a table comparing Corte Madera's current EV reach code requirements to the 2025 Cal Green mandatory requirements. And the last column is showing whether or not our reach code still exceeds Cal Green, and we can't keep anything that doesn't go above the state code. So there's only 2 areas where that's the case. The 2025 Cal Green has just sort of gone leaps and bounds ahead. So the portions where staff are recommending to readopt because it's still exceeding the base code are in the single family category. The Cal Green mandatory only requires an EV capable space in new construction, and our reach code requires EV ready, a level 2 EV ready space for new construction and if there's a panel upgrade. The other area where our reach code is still exceeding the state is in multifamily hotels and motels modifications. We included a panel modification trigger, which is not included in the state code. And that's to add capacity for 20% of parking spaces to be EV ready at that time. And so staff are recommending to readopt those 2 portions. The other areas, as you can see, the state has gone above and beyond. For multifamily, they're now requiring 100% of spaces to have be low power EV ready. And in addition, 25% of common use spaces need to have full level 2 chargers installed. Any questions on the EV component before I move on? No? Okay, so next up is the single family building remodel energy reach code. And I'll just give a little bit more context about why we're focused on single family residential remodels. And this is some analysis that Christine also did around natural gas consumption. And you can see that 75% of gas consumption in Corte Madera is actually residential. So that's why we're focusing on residential. And then if you look at the housing counts by the building vintage and type, you can see the light green on these bars is single family homes. And so those are the largest portion of our residential building stock, and most of them are built before 1978, which is when the energy code went into effect. So most of these homes are not anywhere near as energy efficient as modern homes that are being built to our current energy code. And so that's why the focus on renovation, because that's really where there's a big potential to increase the energy efficiency of these older homes. So the energy reach code applies to remodels and additions of 750 square feet or more in single family homes. There's 2 components to this code. There's mandatory measures, which are to install LED lights if they're not already in place, as well as photo sensors on outside lights so that they turn off during the daytime. Another mandatory measure is if the project includes a service panel upgrade or a kitchen or laundry room remodel, there's electric readiness requirements to get ready for electric appliances in the future. Other component of this is a target energy savings score through the FlexPath measure, which I'll go over in more detail. And then there's a couple exemptions to this code. So newer building vintages are exempted because they're built to a higher energy efficiency standard already. Creating a new accessory dwelling unit or junior accessory dwelling unit is exempted under state law. And then there's a low income exemption if the resident owner is enrolled in PG&E's CARE or FERA programs, which are rate reduction programs for low income residents. They would just install the mandatory measures and not be required to comply with the target score. Then there's also a sort of infeasibility situation if there's something really unique in the home that means they can't install any of the measures, which would be very rare.
Quick question.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Karen, go ahead. Regarding ADUs, sort of outside the scope of this, but ADUs themselves, I should know this, but are they required to be all electric at this point to be
No.
installed in Corte Madera? They're not.
No. We can't require all electric. That was the Berkeley case.
Ah.
Yeah.
So
And they're not subject to any of these requirements.
So if it's a renovation of an existing ADU, it would be subject, but if they're creating a new ADU, there's some state law that applies and we can't apply this to them.
Okay. Is there an equivalent set of codes? Not equivalent, but is there a parallel set of codes for ADUs in terms of energy efficiency and?
Yeah, so they're still required to comply with the state code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same requirements, but just this particular local code wouldn't apply to them.
So Phoebe, is that true also that the state code applies to new building vintage 1992 and beyond?
Yes. Yep.
So
So
really
the state code is the baseline. Every project has to comply with the state code.
So the REACH code really applies to single family renovations with vintages prior to 1992.
Yes, so that's right. Because of the tax credit, federal tax credit ending this year, the newest vintage, the 1992 to 2010 building vintage that we have in our current REACH code is no longer going to be cost effective. The tax credits for solar were the only incentive that the state REACH code team included in their cost effectiveness studies. And that's because A, solar is expensive, and B, these tax credits were supposed to go until 2032. So they felt confident in including them in their study. But given their unexpected early ending, this vintage is no longer cost effective. So Karen had asked a question about this before the meeting. It is still possible, and this is, I think, what Santa Fe has done to require specific measures for that vintage if they're cost effective. So for example, the lighting measure, I guess my concern with that is that it's a relatively small impact, but it's still the same amount of paperwork for staff and the applicant. So that's why it wasn't recommended, but it is something that we could explore further if that's of interest to the committee.
Phoebe, lighting is one, but there's a whole slew of things other than solar here that could have an impact.
Right. But so the way this flexible compliance table works, and I'll do my best. It's sort of setting a maximum target score. So the target scores for context are the energy savings. Each of these points is related to the energy savings in million BTUs, British thermal units. So the way that the state REACH code team that developed this model structure built the ordinance is they added up the energy savings of all the measures that are cost effective individually. And that's the maximum target score, which is, by the way, not the score that we have set. We've set this at less than 50% of what the maximum cost effective score is. But that means that people can comply using measures that technically don't pencil out as cost effective. But the associated energy savings are still there. So there may be some other measures that we could require, but that sort of takes away one of the benefits of this structure is that it's flexible. It's meant to be designed for the homeowner to come in and see what fits their project, their budget, their other features of their home. And so that's one of the things that I think makes this code strong and not overly punitive because people have the options to choose what measures they want to install. And if we start requiring certain measures for that one vintage, I could see that getting a little bit more challenging.
I guess, just clarifying, but has like a low score, so you could just choose more minor renovations or energy efficiency measures been considered?
That's something we could look into. Yeah, I'd have to chat more with the Reach Code team, but
Discussion, a question, not a discussion, so move on.
yeah.
Yeah, I had the same question. I guess I still don't completely understand why just the solar would impact all these others. Yeah, just being thick, but yeah, I guess we can pick it up in the discussion. The question I have about it is, will this be continually reevaluated? Because as the cost of solar continues to come down and the cost of retail electricity continues to go up, even without the tax credit, at some point, those two might cross. Some would argue that it already has. So is this reevaluated on a continual basis to reestablish this vintage?
That's a good question. I don't know how often the Reach Code team plans to update the cost effectiveness study. I do know that this is very new. We learned about this solar issue like only a couple of weeks ago. So I know right now they're actively looking at ways that they might be able to strategize and there's been a couple of different suggestions. So they are actively looking at it right now. And I don't know, but I can check with them how often they plan to update the study as a whole.
Is this Corte Madera specifically? We've made this decision, or is this a county or a state? Is everybody have the same finding, or what is the?
So there's a statewide group that does the cost effectiveness studies. They're specific to the climate zone. So we're in climate zone 3 here. Those are zones determined by the Energy Commission based on the climatic conditions of the area. So these findings are applicable to all of our climate zone and also most of the climate zones throughout the state. There are a few where it still remains cost effective, but not here, unfortunately.
Okay.
Okay. So just to go over this in a little bit more detail, it's set up by building vintage. So there's the pre-1978. Those are the homes built sort of before the energy code, and then 1978 to 1991, different period in the energy code, and then after that. So the homeowner would have to meet the target score for their building vintage, and then they select from the measures. So if they're doing a sort of large renovation project, it's likely that some of these measures they'd already be planning to do, especially the insulation measures, window replacements. Those are pretty common to do in a big renovation. And as you can see, there's different ways to comply. So someone who's planning to do, attic insulation and duct sealing could comply with those 2 measures in the oldest vintage, or they could just install one measure like a heat pump water heater. So it depends on the homeowner, the scope of their project and what they want to choose to install. And yeah, I mentioned that the state Reach Code team that completes the studies to show that these are cost effective, and that's a requirement of the state for any amendments to the energy code.
What time frame do they use to assess the cost effectiveness?
It's over the lifetime of the measures. So it does vary by the measure.
Any examples? 10 years typically, in sense?
I don't have that off the top of my head, sorry, but I can send, or I think I might have linked actually the cost effectiveness study in the report. I can send that out again.
It would depend on the life of the measure itself.
Yep.
So the types of renovations that are impacted, these are again additions and alterations of 750 square feet or larger, which are really large renovation projects. That's about the size of a one-bedroom apartment for context. So, and how it's calculated is the same way as how our fire department calculates altered space when they're applying our fire sprinkler regulation, which is triggered at a 50% remodel. And so there's the total space of any addition is counted, as well as alterations such as moving or replacing a wall, removing sheetrock from a wall, and then sort of minor alterations are not counted. So the projects that have been subject to this ordinance in 2025 so far, there's been 15 projects in about 7.5 months. So it's slightly less than staff were expecting. We were expecting about 30 projects a year. And you'll note that there were 2 projects in the 1992 to 2010 vintage, which next year would be excluded. Many of these projects were actually well above 750 square feet in the 900 plus square feet range. And at that size, at least 50% of them did trigger the fire sprinkler requirement as well. And the project selected 49 measures, which are expected to save 327 million BTUs of energy over their lifetime. You can see some of the measures that were selected here. Window replacements, wall insulation were popular. And there were also some heat pump water heaters and space heaters installed, as well as 1 heat pump clothes dryer. Many of these projects likely used efficiency measures that were already planned. As I mentioned, the wall insulation is pretty common for a large renovation project like this. And some projects also used existing measures in the home to comply, which is allowed if they meet the current standards. The average project claimed 20 points, which is well above our target scores, which to me indicates that projects are not having difficulties meeting these requirements because they're exceeding them by such a large amount. So that concludes our current REACH codes. I did want to touch on, and there was a analysis included as an attachment to the staff report of some of the other potential REACH code additions or updates that have been discussed or that are in place in other jurisdictions. Most of them staff are not recommending just due to their small expected impact on greenhouse gas emissions versus the high amount of staff time that would be required to implement them. And in some cases, like with the AC to heat pump requirement, there are actions by other agencies that are already sort of having the same impact. And we feel that our current REACH codes are really targeted at our largest source of emissions. Staff would like the committee's feedback on the possibility of lowering the single family energy remodel REACH code threshold to 500 square feet from its current 750. That is sort of the direction that the other Marin County jurisdictions that have this code are going. There's 6 other Marin jurisdictions that have this code, and all of them, except San Anselmo at this time, are planning to go under 750 square feet this code cycle. So San Rafael is already at 500 square feet. They're actually increasing their target scores this code cycle. And then Fairfax already has a 200 square foot threshold just because their building stock is a lot smaller. And so renovation projects are a lot smaller as well. Yeah.
Do we have any idea how many more projects
That's
within?
what I was just getting to. So yes, ideally I would have a nice chart to present to you all. Unfortunately, our permit system is just not set up in a way that's easy to extract that data. So I have a request in, and I was hoping it would yield some data at this point, but no, unfortunately, we don't have permit data on how many more projects this would impact. The best I can say is that Marin County, who is also planning to lower to 500 square feet this fall. They've been able to do a more complete analysis of their data, and they're expecting to capture about 50% more projects by dropping down to 500.
That's so unincorporated Marin.
Yes.
Towns, yeah, okay.
Yes. And just a reminder, caveat that any of these kind of changes are still subject to detailed review by the town attorney and
Yep.
and all that.
Is that the summary? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's very thorough. We should open for public comment and then we'll have committee comments and discussion.
Yeah. And just quickly, just in terms of next steps. So feedback tonight from the committee, and then the plan is for the September 17th committee meeting to have a draft ordinance for the committee to consider making a recommendation to council. The ordinance is planned to go to the October 7th council meeting for a public hearing and first reading. Building code adoption requires two public hearings, so they would also have a public hearing at the October 21st council meeting where it would potentially be adopted, and the ordinance would go into effect on January 1st with the entire state building code. So with that, I'll move to public comment. I thought I had a hand raised, but we have a hand raised from Roy. Roy, you can go ahead with your public comment.
Okay, good evening again. Just the lowering the threshold for square footage on the REACH code. This is about 3 years ago in Fairfax, where was a young couple that had purchased a house, and they wanted to do just some slight modifications. But Fairfax is so restrictive, down to 250, it increased the cost of what they had to do then by $40,000. So be very careful on lowering that REACH code square footage requirement, because it can have a major impact on the cost to the homeowner or contractor, whoever's doing the work. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Roy. Noted. Other comments from the committee? Surely there must be some.
I would just make recommendations. Are you asking for
Yeah,
recommendations?
so to summarize, the current staff proposal is to readopt the current REACH codes where they still exceed this base code. So looking for the committee's feedback on that proposal, as well as the potential of any changes, if anything, that we've discussed is of interest to the committee.
So I guess the one thing I would be curious about is if it was possible for that 92, the exact vintage, 92, 2001, is that right? I something like that, to have a lesser score of minor energy conservation measures. It would seem there should be something, if you're, tearing things up, so to speak, that you could apply a few, and have if that's, I realize, you're dealing with staff time, et cetera, but it seems to me there's a bunch of things there that are not solar, realizing that may not be as cost effective, but, is it air sealing? I assume that's air duct sealing, et cetera. A few other things, pretty low cost. So maybe staff's already explored that, but I would advocate that. And the second thing is, I think at least in Corte Madera, the 500 square foot threshold for most of our residents, if they're doing a major renovation, shouldn't be too problematic. So I would put that forward.
Other comments?
Yeah, I would agree with Karen that
Is your mic on?
I would agree with Karen that the 500 square foot threshold is not normally a difficult problem. The costs of doing attic insulation and raised floor insulation are minimal compared to in those construction costs, and should be easily reached. I also think that the larger the project, the more mandatory measures should be put in. I guess that's not addressing the topic exactly, but somebody's doing a very modest project. I can see where it's hardly worth the time to go through all the rigmarole of doing that. But if somebody's doing a relatively large project, they should, and creating a much larger home, that they are contributing more to greenhouse gases by their behavior, as well as what the building's doing. It's really the people who are, creating the greenhouse gases. The building's just sitting there to be used in a cavalier flat fashion or in a thoughtful fashion. And I think the larger buildings should have higher measures than the other buildings. But all remodel projects should be trying to comply.
They just anecdotally from reviewing the permit data, it does appear that the larger projects are selecting more measures and incorporating them. And I think that's exactly because if you're doing a whole house remodel, that's when it really makes the sense to put in the higher insulation and all that.
Thank you, Phil. Sarah, any comments?
Yes, thank you. I think I'm on the same page with lowering the remodel threshold from 750 to 500 in accordance with other surrounding areas that are also at or going to be lowering their threshold to be matching, the surrounding jurisdictions. That makes sense to me. As I look at the removing of the 92 to 2010 building vintage, just for clarification for me, when it says it's no longer cost effective, is that no longer cost effective for the town staff or?
No, that means the project complying with the code in our climate zone is no longer cost effective for the homeowner.
In that completing those measures wouldn't be beneficial from a greenhouse gas perspective, or I'm not sure if I'm understanding what the
Yeah, so there's a couple ways that the cost effectiveness study looks at it. It looks at sort of the net present value, and it also looks at the on-bill energy savings over the lifetime of the measures. So it's looking at the cost of installing one of these measures and then how much energy it's saving the homeowner compared to had they not installed the measure.
I see. So
that's how it's
for
determined
them in the long term, that they're seeing that return monetarily. I see.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what the Energy Commission requires, that we find that these codes are cost effective in order to make amendments to the state.
Oh, I see.
code.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Any comments?
I just wanted to say I agree, but I'd also wondering if you could clarify the new thing that was talking about how you can't you can't add on to the REACH codes from October 1st through June 2031. How does this tie into that? Like, are we trying to get this out before October 1st, or is it just?
No, so we would be planning to use one of those exemptions to readopt our codes and potentially to make amendments. So there's that substantially equivalent exemption that we believe allows us to readopt our current codes after October 1st. And then the general plan exemption is what we could potentially use to make changes that aren't substantially equivalent. So there have been several jurisdictions in Marin actually that have sort of rushed to adopt before that September deadline. And we didn't take that approach because we already had we felt strong reach codes in place. And we were looking at these opportunities, the exemptions in the code to sort of adopt after that timeline. And also that's a very tight timeline given this whole, it's not just our approval process, it's also the state's approval process. So we didn't think we'd be able to make the deadline. Yeah, good question.
Any further, Penelope? No, no, okay. Well, thanks again for the summary. I have a number of comments. I guess I have the same concern that I had the last time we talked about this, which is if we're going to, and specifically if the proposal is to lower the square footage and therefore catch more projects, I think we should make it easier to comply. I do really worry about the cost impact on people. It might pencil out over 10 years, but the reality is they need to come up with the cash today to do some of these things. And I think we have consistently underestimated the impact of that on people as they do projects. Having been through one 7 years ago in a much, when I think the requirements were considerably less. Even then, it was quite onerous when you add in, you have to replace your sewer lateral, you might trigger the sprinkler installation, panel upgrades, and so on. There's a lot of extra stuff that gets triggered when people do projects, and I'm concerned that we may discourage people from upgrading the housing stock here by lowering this. Part of that, so that's point one. Point two, I think a lot of that revolves around the way that the square footage is calculated. I've never liked the way that the sprinkler code requires it, which is, I'll give you an example. So if somebody has an open floor plan downstairs, let's say, or in their master bedroom, and they want to move one wall to make their bathroom slightly larger, that triggers the entire master bedroom. And to me, that doesn't make any sense. So if you're going to do a, 150 square foot renovation on a bathroom and move a wall 3 feet, that shouldn't trigger the requirement to do all this stuff in my view. So I would encourage the town to think very carefully about whether that's the right way to calculate the square footage if you're going to do this. It triggers a bunch of stuff that, in my view, is orthogonal to the types of work that people are doing, and I think it may discourage people from doing the work. So, as it's currently drafted, I'm not in favor actually of lowering the square footage, much as I'd like to for other reasons. But I think from when you take the cost impact on people who are already stretching to do whatever project it is, most people that I know, when you then layer on another, oh, by the way, you have to do X, Y, and Z. I think it's not the way it's set up today. I don't feel comfortable increasing the burden on people. The second point I make on that is the devil's in the details here in terms of what's required to comply with these measures. So I did read I haven't gone into the super nitty gritty, but for instance, on the insulation, if I read it correctly, you had to do all 4 walls. So you didn't get credit for doing 1 wall or 2 walls. So for instance, we replaced the siding on our house a year or 2 ago and upgraded on one side of our house, which was a lot of money. And we upgraded the insulation on that side of the wall while it was open, but we wouldn't get credit for that under this code, as I understand it. Another example would be the requirement to have the ducts tested, but an exemption if you did it within the last 3 years. So 3 years feels pretty tight. It seems like if people have qualified, say 5 years ago, like why wouldn't that be, you could say that was good enough, and therefore instead you're forcing people to go out and get their ducts tested again to comply with this. It just feels like wasted money from my point of view. So there's a number of things here which, if you're going to require people to comply, you need to make it easier and give people credit for things they've done. I also don't know, for instance, on the heat pump, there was a reference to if you already have a heat pump, but it meets requirements of code X, Y, and Z, which I didn't go into in detail, you qualify, but what if it doesn't? So what if you're off by, the new generation of heat pumps is this much more efficient? Guess what? Your old one doesn't count. So you now have to do something else. You have to put insulation. So I think the devil's in the details. I don't think the implementation has been thought through, frankly, with the homeowner in mind here. So I'm concerned that we will either encourage people evading the code requirement by monkeying with the square footage or not doing projects because the cost goes up considerably. Next point I would make is agree with, it was certainly what Committee Member Lang was saying, and I think others. It doesn't make any sense to me to exclude the 1992 to 2010 vintage. That feels like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So would encourage the town to have another look at that and see if there's a way that it's frankly an inequitable exclusion, because anybody who's in a house built in 1991 is suddenly subject to what could be potentially onerous cost additions, while those who are slightly newer houses aren't. It doesn't feel equitable.
Is that all your comments?
Did I miss anything? Any other complaints about it? No, I think that's it.
Thank you for your feedback. Yeah, I'll just say in terms of some of the measure details as well as the sort of buckets, it's all based on the energy code updates. So the energy code's updated every 3 years. And that's what these measures are based on. So that's why there's a 3-year window on the duct standards. And same with the buckets for the vintages. Those are based on sort of different periods in the state's energy code history. But I will definitely look into the possibility of including a lower score for the newest vintage. I think it would have to be quite low because it can't include solar in that calculation. But I will check in with the state team and see what our options are there.
What about the calculation of square footage? Is that mandatory that we use that methodology that's used for sprinklers?
It's not mandatory, but the idea is to be sort of consistent across the people who are reviewing the permits. So that was the main reason that we chose to use that same calculation as fire. And we'd have to have a discussion about that as staff to see how to rewrite that. I think that would be challenging.
Well, it just feels like it misses the substance of size of what people are actually doing. I mean, it doesn't seem like a fair calculation. So
Is it calculated from the inside of the exterior walls?
yeah,
I
think so.
would, yes.
But any adjacent space is included.
Yeah. So if they're moving a wall, then it's the adjacent rooms. If they're just removing wall covering, so sheetrock, then it's 3 feet out from the wall that the covering's being removed from.
Yeah. Or at least have the capacity to make exceptions if people, if someone is in fact, like the example I gave, somebody's moving their wall a little bit, but they're not actually touching the adjacent space. So you've got a huge room that's not being touched and a small room that is. It doesn't seem.
Include a reasonableness factor.
Yeah. Yeah. As a side comment, I mean, this is somewhat off-piste, but I find the sprinkler installation requirement, although I'm sure there's good reasons for it, in the era that we live in of wildfires, where this seems to be the primary fire danger. It's interesting that we're still focused on the interior sprinklers as opposed to external fire hardening measures that might be money better spent, but.
I can't speak to that.
No.
I know our fire department is very strongly supportive of those sprinkler requirements, but they would know the details better than me. So I'm hearing some mixed opinions on the idea of lowering the square footage. And I'd like to sort of get to a clearer conclusion on that, so I know what to draft to bring back. So is there any further discussion on that item, or would the committee like to take a vote or show of hands on who is supportive? How would you like to come to a decision on that? And just with the caveat that this is something that we'll explore but can't guarantee.
Well, I think we could take a vote. I think there are problems with all measures. And all of these compliances, when you sell a house, et cetera, are expensive. But I guess, I support what Sarah said. I think consistency is key. And while I think a lot of these measurements could be improved and looked into, I think the more projects that can comply, the better off we are. And if you get into projects that are smaller, we got less cost, a little bit. So, less cost overall. So I guess I would continue to support the 500 square feet, but I would say throw it up to a vote. And do we need to do that today?
Not necessarily. I could bring back, and so I have asked, this is an old table that the Reach Code team created showing the cost of compliance as a share of project cost. And this is for an 800 square foot addition. So I have asked if they can update this to help us better evaluate the upfront costs that would be associated with a 500 square foot addition. And I'm hoping they'll have that ready in time for the next meeting. So if there's not a decision this evening, and I'll continue to explore this with our town attorney and other staff, I could bring back sort of two versions of an ordinance, or just leave the number blank and have the committee's recommendation at that time. And so I know there's missing information here, so I apologize I wasn't able to get that all together before this meeting.
That efficiency measure there only has 5 compliance points, and that doesn't align with the previous sheet. Is that right?
Yeah, so this, as I said, this is outdated, and what I'm guessing is that this is for the newest building vintage. So the savings vary by the vintage. Yeah, this is actually also the previous cost effectiveness study. So this is for illustrative purposes only.
Yeah, and as a percentage, I mean, if we shrink the project size, most of these measures, the cost of doing them won't actually go down. So there's a percentage of the project cost, it's probably going to go up
Yes,
as
that's true.
if we lower the square footage of this.
Yes, that is true. And I'd also say that all of these projects are, or a good number of them are going well above the requirements.
Yeah. I guess the other comment I'd make is the evaluation is not, so we're the Climate Action Committee, not the Energy Efficiency Committee. And we don't actually have an assessment of what the climate impact, what the emissions impact is relative to these.
So this does have, at the last column, is the greenhouse gas reductions from.
PhD. Okay,
Mhm.
my mistake.
I guess, so Phoebe, now, this is where I get kind of confused, particularly with that last vintage. So these are showing, I believe the minimum point was 6 on the other slide. Is that right?
So this is, so this is for the newest building vintage.
Okay, but that says efficiency plus heat pump dryer, and that gives you a score of 6. So what am I missing? Why do you need solar to make it cost effective?
So there's two different, this is looking at meeting the target score. And that's separate from the efficiency or from the cost effectiveness calculation.
Okay.
So the cost effectiveness calculation is setting the maximum target score. So I think I have somewhere in here.
I get it. Yeah.
I don't. So,
okay. So
just to clarify, so the reason they've thrown out the entire vintage is because one of the measures is no longer cost effective, and therefore it's not consistent with the other.
No. So the solar measure was used to set the maximum cost effective score for that vintage. So without solar, I think the maximum cost effective score is probably going to be 2. So we can still keep that, and I will look into, whatever updates the Reach Code team is doing right now, to see what can be required there. I think San Rafael just did the lighting measure for the newest vintage, but it does significantly limit the target score.
Got it.
So for comparison, the maximum target scores for the pre-1978 vintage is 33, and for the 1978 to 1991 is 22. So the county, and this is all based off of the county's model codes that they developed in 2022. I think they sort of picked a target score that they felt wasn't going to be too onerous for people to meet, and it was set at significantly less than the maximum.
Okay. Why don't we, in the interest of time, let's wrap this up. I think we probably have 3 votes, I think, or at least a recommendation and 2 votes. The first one is around whether we should recommend that this vintage of housing be somehow included, or at least have the staff take a look at that and see if that could be re-included in the plan. We have general consensus on that? Yes, I think you have a unanimous recommendation on that. The second one would be whether we want to recommend the readoption of the existing code, holding aside the square footage question, right? You said there were a number of topics those ones that you outlined where we could readopt the ones that were already exceeding the
Yes, so
state
that would,
requirement.
yes, readopting the energy reach code and the EV requirements.
Yep. So do we have consensus on that? We would like to readopt the existing codes? Yes. And then the third point would be whether the committee recommends to reduce the square footage threshold from 750 to 500 square feet. So let's take a vote on that.
All those in favor? Should we do it that
Well,
way?
I thought Phoebe was going to roll call it,
Oh,
but
sorry. Go ahead.
unless you don't need to.
Up to you.
We don't
Okay.
need to, it's not actually an action item, so
Okay.
it's not, doesn't need to be an official vote, but maybe just a
Okay.
show of
Well,
hands.
all in favor of reducing the square footage threshold? And I'm opposed as it's currently written.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That's very helpful feedback.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on. We're over time, so apologies, but that was a good discussion. I think and thank you, Phoebe, for bringing that in a very as clear as it can be,
Yeah.
way with a lot
Way
of
back.
material. So, okay, discussion of the committee participation in the Lions Club car show. Are you leading that discussion, or who's you?
Yeah,
Sarah?
take a lead on
Okay,
that.
great.
That works. Yeah. So Karen and I and Brittany and Penelope and Phoebe have been in discussions about how to approach the car show this year, looking at the success we had at 4th of July and really thinking about our target audience for the car show and what our main messaging we want to be. We developed some new materials to present at the table. One of them is a new graphic to incentivize people to adopt EVs, to buy an EV when they're ready to get a new car, and to really emphasize that the tax credit is ending very soon and to take advantage of it if that's something that they're ready to do. As part of that, we are including information about the charging infrastructure that is present in California to help reduce charging anxiety among those who might be not quite sure if they're ready for an EV because they're worried about how to keep it charged up. So with that, we will have a graphic, a poster-sized graphic to draw people to the table to talk about EVs, and 2, a QR code that people can scan that goes to a material from the Department of Energy that has a robust listing of different alternative energy infrastructure across California, particularly EVs, and people can review that source and even plan trips, and that can help give people context for where charging stations are as compared to their everyday commutes, to their trips to Tahoe, anywhere in the United States, and make a choice on whether or not that's right for them. But that's a pretty robust website for people to be able to review that material. We're also going to have handouts from Marin County, the postcards that the committee developed, as well as a few more materials that we can review here on the table to talk about what the committee does and to answer people's questions, particularly about EVs. Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Can I comment? I guess, yeah.
Sir, technically responsible.
I'm sorry.
Before we
Okay.
comment, so unless you have more to present.
I am not seeing any hands raised at this time.
Okay, so okay, where is oh, here it is. It's all right. So and I just completely did that in, okay. So we do, but
Display
what I
them on
want
the
to
screen.
say is my experience in going to these events is that, we have a lot of detail, but we kind of want to grab people as they go by and maybe just have some simple messaging. It's kind of like when when we have PowerPoint presentations, you're really just trying to grab people's attention. So I certainly like this and would love to see it big, but in my mind, reordering so why go electric? For me, the most important thing comes out, is the money, which is this $7,500 rebate. And there are other rebates, MC, but this is great. But the 40% of everybody else having it, go get one because everybody else has one, to me doesn't resonate. So the big thing would be the rebate. They also have less maintenance costs, whether or not they're cost effective, that's a whole different story, but really lead with the money. Then the chargers, they're easy to get fuel. Those two. So it's really the rebates, the maintenance, the charging is available. And then a side point would be join everybody else who's doing it. So that would be it. But the why go electric, you can get rebates, you can get it charged, slow maintenance, and join everybody else. That's the message. Get it highlighted, it's big. And then have, when you have these brochures stuck in here, say info on EVs. So someone goes by, they get a big message, info on EVs. And then on chargers, so there are 178,000 chargers, but we talked about having a map, which of course you can't identify the individual chargers, but I think that's good. If we have a huge map of Marin and all these dots, the message really isn't, oh, can I locate a charger? But my gosh, there's a lot of chargers. And then we have this handy charger locator. And then we have information on chargers and, hopefully here in a little plastic, whatever thing, which says charging information. And everything else I think should be in the background so that I guess, again, when I was at these events, someone should just be able to go by, grab one or two pieces of, a brochure, and then leave. If they start, if they want to wander into something with more details, great. But I think if we can keep to a message which tries to attract them and make it very simple, not overwhelmed, I think it might grab some people's attention. So that's my comment. And that was one of the reasons I kind of wanted to see this. And, we had some communication on this, but I'm not sure, the ordering and bring it up. This, we can also add down here the greenhouse gas impact. But again, I think for this particular show, kind of shove that in the background, you can add an item here. Rebates, maintenance, it's easy to charge. Join everybody else and help greenhouse gas is the bottom point. That's my comment.
Thank you, Karen. Ralphie?
Sorry, I'd also add just on top of I'm not in a position to buy a car right now, but I think for me, the deadline would be the biggest thing, just because that's coming up really soon. And just, I think seeing a large deadline would incentivize people to do it quickly.
Comments, Phil? No. I have one very minor comment, which is we probably should say gasoline, not gas, just to, sorry. Chargers, then gas nozzles. Sorry, and that's very minor. Okay, did you get the feedback you were looking for?
Yes, I think so. Thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
we can look into those changes. I think for developing a map, something that Phoebe mentioned, which I thought also kind of made sense, was that a lot of the charging anxiety comes from people driving even further out than Marin County, like the entire state of California. So I can look into if there's reasonable ways to display the 178,000 dots within California that might end up getting a little bit overwhelming, which is why the QR code might help resolve that issue, because it does, you can't zoom out and see the state of California as a whole, but happy to explore the map option too as a visual, because I think it could be powerful, and we can see, we can find something that's going to translate well.
I think my guess is most people, a few will look at the QR code, but most people won't. So if they have a map which shows, wow, there's tons, I think that's the message. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you for taking the lead on that.
I'll just
sorry.
add one comment on this sign. I think it's going to look better printed on our plotter if it has a blank background instead of being solid blue, just because our plotter has some quirks. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
But the graphics are great. I mean, those I think really help draw. Yeah.
Good. So some minor suggestions, but overall supportive. Yep. And Phoebe, it's staffed up the car.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in terms of volunteers, we have Sarah and Phil for the morning shift, and then Vinitha and I will be there in the afternoon. I'll actually be there all day because I'm assuming we want to bring one of the town EVs again. Is that still okay? So yeah, I'll be there with the town EV, but mainly at the booth in the afternoon. And that's coming up Saturday, September 13th.
Good. Anything further on that point?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay. Item D, discussion of outreach to promote multifamily EV charger installations.
Yeah, I have a couple of updates to share with the committee. So on the postcard, the final version, which is up there, was mailed to 26 properties, both the owner's address and the actual property address in Corte Madera on August 5th. So far, we have not had any scans of the QR code. And I did just get the mail postman just delivered a couple that did not reach their intended address. So about 6 of them got returned. So that's the update on the postcard. On the email, we had been in discussion with MCE around potentially sending an email through their lists. And unfortunately, they have not been able to identify from their information the accounts that are associated with the property owner versus the tenants. So they don't feel comfortable sending out an email to tenants asking them to tell their landlord about this program. So at this time, they're not able to move forward with the email, but they are actively looking into other strategies, and they're working on their 2026 multifamily outreach strategy. So Sebastian said it would continue to be something they can look into. And then the other sort of outreach strategy that the committee had come up with was the idea of putting a sticker on the public stations. And I did include a draft sticker in the agenda packet, as well as a draft webpage outline that the sticker QR code would link to. And the rationale there being that if we're targeting renters or employees in town, it may make more sense to send them to an intermediate page with some more guidance rather than sending them directly to MCE's page, which is what we did with the postcard. So if there's any feedback on the sticker design or the website, I'm happy to take that now or later.
Okay. Any public comment on this?
No hands raised.
Okay. Committee member comments? No? Sorry.
No, I think the sticker is a great idea. I think that can be a good way to capture the target audience that we're looking for. And it's helpful to get an idea of how many people scan the code. It's helpful context for the postcards, and it could be helpful for this too, if it's possible to quantify it.
Yeah.
It's really tough. Okay, maybe we want to have another re-strategy session here. It's, when we first started this, just cold calling, those 3 or 4, I got the impression this was going to be tough, but I didn't realize this is really hard. It's really hard getting the decision maker. I don't know.
Okay, maybe we can follow up on other ideas potentially, or bring them to the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I
I think Phil may also have an update on the presentation.
Before we move on, I was going to ask, will we have anything at the Lions Club car show regarding multifamily chargers?
Yep.
Yes. So we have the postcard. We printed some extras of those, and then we also have the county's handout on multifamily, which is similar to the website draft.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the material there.
Right. And then we had the Marin Property Owners Association presentation.
Yeah, I heard back from the secretary, and they're happy for me to give a presentation there. And I'm talking with Phoebe about maybe coordinating with MCE if they wish to participate in my presentation, and I would want to have a practice session with them and I'll probably do another practice session with some of you guys to see, and then hopefully it can evolve into something where it might work in town too. There might be a connection through the Rental Properties Association. The attendance on this month's meeting was a little quick, but so I'm planning on, I think it's October 27th. It's a presentation day.
That's good. Okay. Anything else on the multifamily EV for today? We can certainly follow up. Nope. Okay. Then let's move on to our last agenda item, discussion of outreach to promote the expiring clean energy vehicle tax credits.
Yes, I can kick this off. So we have had an article, there's an article in the newsletter for 2 weeks about the tax credits expiring. And at the last meeting, the committee discussed the possibility of putting something on the town's social media as well. So I sent out a media toolkit that was put together by an organization that works on building decarbonization. And so that's available if we want to use those materials for the social media posts. And I think, Sarah, you had found one that you liked. It was just on the EVs. So I wasn't sure if the committee would like to focus on the EV credits right now and the other ones later, or if we want to find a sort of general post, that is still an option. And we can also put the information back in the newsletter and do another run of that.
I think all rebates are relevant. Blast away, you know, one on EVs, one on everything. I mean, I don't know, get the word out.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I'll work on getting something out in the social media.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comment on that? I assume not.
No, not at this time.
Okay. Any other comments?
Have we done a postcard of like specifically about the federal tax credits for the electric vehicles yet?
No.
I just wonder if like spreading that information in the same way we're trying to do the multifamily chargers might be.
We haven't, and that's certainly possible. One reason why we didn't focus as much on electric vehicles to date was because we have such a relatively high adoption rate in Corte Madera. We didn't feel that was where we needed to focus on. But because people, what is it, 40% of people are buying them. But this rebate, it is, that's why I said we want to get that out. So we've relying on social media. Do people feel a postcard? By the time we draft a postcard and get it out, they'll be done. Yeah. So I think social media is good. Yeah.
I will also say that there are several state rebates that are being re-upped with funding right now. So the California Energy Smart Homes, that's funding for all electric new construction and whole building electrification, recently got new funding. California Electric Homes, which is for market rate all electric new construction. And then the Tech Clean California single family incentives for heat pump water heaters and HVAC have recently relaunched.
Yes, but it's like on sale now, buy now,
Yeah.
and then 2 months from now we can say, on sale, I think it would be another opportunity for promotion. Yeah.
I'm surprised I haven't seen more of that messaging from the car companies themselves. It would seem to be in their interest, but I'm surprised I haven't seen much of it. So, okay, well, any other ideas on that? Feel free to share them with Phoebe. But yeah, it needs to be executable fairly quickly, obviously, to be useful. So. It is a shame, but so it goes. Okay. Any other comments on that one? Or are we good? No. Okay. In that case, we're on to updates and reports, starting with Phoebe.
Yes.
We have it covered.
I'll try and be brief. There were some new EV charging space regulations adopted at the August 5th council meeting, really aimed at preventing people from parking in the charging spaces without charging, which has been an issue at the town park chargers. So those regulations will essentially prohibit that and allow for citations if there's someone who's really egregiously parking there without charging. That goes into effect September 5th, and there'll be some new signage going up to communicate that. We are also recently kicked off the MTC Fleet Electrification Technical Assistance, which is a work plan item and was meant to kick off last year, but MTC was having some challenges with their consultant procurement. So we're now working with a consultant called Optiny, and it's being entirely funded by MTC, so no cost to the town to develop this plan, which will help us plan out how to transition our municipal fleet to electric vehicles and what the vehicles are available, funding that's available, plan for charging that's needed for the vehicles, all that's included. It's expected to take about 8 months. So really excited that has finally kicked off. Mentioned at the last meeting, but the Marine Green Home Tour is on September 27th. It's in person this year, and it has been a great event online the past couple of years. So I'm excited to see it in person. It's on Saturday, September 27th, and it does require pre-registration because you'll actually be visiting people's homes. We also rescheduled a repair fair. So this year took place in February at the community center and was very successful. That was a partnership with Zero Waste Marin. And so it was a pilot program, but they've continued it to this year because they were so successful. So ours will be on June 6th of 2026 at the community center. And then finally, I'm just letting you all know that I'll be on vacation next week. So expect a delayed response. That's it.
If you have one question, you said that, there's been an issue with people parking at the EV charging parking spaces. Have the chargers been used? Do you have data on that might be presented or another meeting?
Yeah. I am planning on doing a sort of more comprehensive look at the charging station usage towards the end of the year and looking at the fees as well and making sure that we're recovering our costs and not overcharging. So I can definitely present that information to the committee as well. The stations at Town Park do seem to be getting good usage.
Good. Any updates from committee members? Unless Phoebe, you have anything else? No. Okay. Committee member updates on anything we haven't discussed? No. Okay. In that case, looking to the next meeting agenda items, I'm assuming that we will be talking about building codes again. That'll definitely be on there. Lions Club car show will be passed at that point, so that won't be on the agenda.
Do we want to do a recap of it?
Yep.
How it went?
Sure.
I guess, sorry. Go ahead. And then the other thing is, I believe Phoebe had said we're on schedule to an update of our KPIs. So.
Yeah, I think that might be a challenge to get for the next month,
Okay.
just because of all the demands on our building team right now, and
Okay.
already have a couple permit data requests into them.
Okay.
So
Okay.
to
So
wait for a later month.
yeah, I'll wait for October. So not September.
Okay. And we think we'll be talking about multifamily EV chargers again. Worth a revisit, see if we get any or any other ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Discuss how, maybe if people think how we can, rethink it. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's keep that on for now. We can see if we have much to talk about as we get closer and decide if we want to keep it. Okay. Any other agenda topics that are coming to mind for next month? Okay. Unless there's any other business, in that case, we will adjourn. Thank you very much.